Funding for the Hinckley Report is made possible in part by the George S. and Dolores Doré Eccles Foundation and the Cleone Peterson Eccles Endowment Fund.
Tonight on the Hinckley Report. The impeachment inquiry continues to escalate as Congress subpoenas major players in the Trump administration. Utah's congressional leaders enter the fray, garnering national attention. The Salt Lake City mayoral race intensifies as important endorsements roll in. And former Ambassador Jon Huntsman considers a bid to return to the governor's office. Good evening and welcome to the Hinckley Report. I'm Jason Perry, director of the Hinckley Institute of Politics. Covering the week, we have Michelle Quist, columnist for the Salt Lake Tribune, Ben Winslow, political reporter for Fox 13 News, and Rod Arquette, host of the Rod Arquette Show on KNRS. So glad to have you all with us. Big week in news, big week in politics. Michelle, I'm going to start with you a little bit about what's happening, kind of about the impeachment inquiry, but mostly about how Utah is playing a part of this, particularly with Mitt Romney.
Right.
So talk about that a little bit, because Mitt weighed in pretty significantly on a couple specific issues with the president this last week.
Yeah, you know, he's never afraid to speak what he thinks and speak out against something that President Trump is doing. You know, what I loved this week was just Romney. He's a class act. You know, Trump's, had these multiple tweets about Romney needs to be impeached and, all these things. And then a few days later, you see this tweet from from Senator Romney with his wife and his grandkids on a pumpkin patch. And it's like, we're out having fun. What I loved was the message on his granddaughter's shirt in French. It said, "You first." Now, I don't know if that was on purpose, but I loved it. It was the best subtweet ever.
Ben, I don't know what the subtext was there, but it was interesting in terms of the response, because the president has had some harsh things to say about Senator Romney.
Pompous ass, can we say that on this show?
Well, that's part of a tweet.
Yeah.
I think you just did.
Yeah.
So it's part of a tweet, in fact. What do you make of this? Does that mean that Romney's, striking a chord there, or what? Or
he's clearly just carving out his space, and right now it is a lonely island, at least in Washington, because he seems to be the only Senate Republican saying these kinds of things about the president or about the impeachment proceedings, about Syria. Well, Syria being a little bit different because there are a number of Republicans now, I should say, but he's clearly digging in his position, whether or not he's getting alliances privately, publicly from other Senate Republicans as this thing lurches forward. That remains to be seen. We'll just have to figure it out. But right now, the war is on Twitter.
Well, so it is right now. But what do you think of that comment you just made? Is he kind of making an opportunity for other Republicans to see some light, some buffer between the president and other Republicans?
It does make you wonder if Mitt Romney is going to take the heat from the president to give cover fire for everybody else. We got to see what others do if they step up as the impeachment proceedings go forward, of course, in the House, and if they get past the House and into the Senate.
Rod, what are you hearing?
Well, this is the greatest feud since Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, if you really think about it. I mean, this is really good. And pick up on Ben's point. I wonder if Romney, in a way, is trying to position himself the way Joe Lieberman did during the Clinton impeachment trial. Remember, everyone was kind of considering that Joe Lieberman was the moral leader of the Senate. Joe Lieberman got up during that trial and basically said, look, what he did was wrong. It was wrong. I didn't like it. But I don't think we shouldn't impeach him. And that gave cover to a lot of other Democratic senators at the time. So I wonder if Romney is positioning himself in that same regard to give other Republicans cover if it gets to the Senate and if it gets to a trial. But, Romney's base here in Utah and where he is, at least on my radio show, people are very upset at Mitt Romney. I mean, they are calling for his head. They're calling for his impeachment because they think, he should be at least somewhat supportive of the president, and they don't see it, even though he said at a news conference this week that he's with the president 80% of the time. But it's that 20% which irritates people.
So, Michelle, let's talk about that 20% because you kind of have to look at the numbers in Utah. When Mitt Romney ran for office, he got 90% of the self-identified Republicans voted for him.
Right. Yeah, he's not going to ever have a problem here in a campaign, in an election, in a general election in Utah. He's just not. His favorability is always high. People love him. I'm really interested in what Rod said. I think it's a great point. He's putting himself out there now as a moral leader and as a moral figure. You know, what Trump did was wrong, but I don't see him ever supporting impeachment win a vote, you know, in a Senate trial. I don't think he would ever vote for it. I think he's giving the space to allow us to say this isn't okay, but I don't think he would ever go that far.
Well, I think I want to pick up on what Michelle. There are some conservatives out there, and I'm aware of it, who are thinking, do we take on Romney when he comes up for re-election already? You know, because there is the Mike Kennedy supporters out there during the convention when Kennedy and Romney went at it for the Senate, who still do not believe in Mitt Romney and are looking for maybe a stronger candidate to take him on. And there are a few out there who are at least thinking about it.
For sure.
But as you look at those potential candidates and that base, because the Republican base, the self-identified Republicans, were very much with Romney last time, not with Kennedy necessarily.
But not in the convention.
Yeah. In the convention, exactly. So I'm just kind of curious. I mean, is there a real risk for Romney to take such a hard line, in your opinion?
I don't think so, but I think it does give those who are opposed to him an opportunity to go after him a little bit stronger, because at least callers on the radio show that I do, a lot of these callers are saying, I voted for him, next time, no. At least at this point. But this is we're 4 years away. So things could change. Trump may not be president in 4 years. Who knows?
Right, and Romney's not up till 2024.
Yeah. So he's got a while. He's got some space.
Okay, Ben, I want to show a tweet from Senator Romney and get your take on this as he talks about kind of the essence of this impeachment inquiry that may happen. He said, when the only American citizen President Trump singles out for China's investigation is his political opponent. In the midst of a Democratic nomination, it strains credulity and suggests that it is anything other than politically motivated. That's a pretty strong tweet.
Very strong tweet.
So, and it's very specific also. So when you look at Mitt Romney on this particular issue, I mean, how big of an impact is a tweet like that going to have? And is that really what many Republicans, particularly in the Senate, might really think?
It might be what they privately think. Remember what he was before he was Utah Senator, presidential candidate for the United States, the Republican nominee. So he's speaking with some authority. He's speaking with outsized influence and a bully pulpit. And clearly, it's sending a signal. And I think it may send a signal from other factions, other offices in D.C.
So, Michelle, what are you hearing about his colleagues? You know, Michael in the Senate and certainly those in the House.
Not much. I mean, Representative Stewart, what do I care about all that stuff? It doesn't matter. He just, he doesn't recognize what Senator Romney does, which is why it's so important that Senator Romney uses the quotes and uses the facts and the data when he puts himself out there, because it's hard to argue against.
Yeah, Rod, I'm so interested about what Michelle just said. It was such a good point, because they're not saying anything. The Republican colleagues are not.
Very quiet.
What do you make of that?
Very, very quiet. It depends. The former Arizona senator talking about, that he knows of at least 19 or 30 who would vote in favor of impeachment. They aren't going to speak ill of each other. That's kind of the unwritten rule in Washington. Trump can say all he wants, but they aren't going to speak ill of each other, because if you ask Chris Stewart, what do you think of Romney? You ask Mike Lee, well, that's between him and, that's their own battle. So they aren't going to say anything until maybe it gets to a point that something really emerges here that they can hang their hat on. But right now, a lot of them still, Mike Lee, right from the beginning, said, I just don't see anything here, that's impeachable.
It's just safe.
It's safe, yeah.
That's why people admire Romney, because he's not necessarily always safe. He's not necessarily always partisan. He'll go out on a limb and say what people think, is right and wrong. He'll put himself out there.
The question is, and the theory is, why is he doing this? What is Mitt Romney's end game? Everybody is trying to analyze, what's he doing here? He denies he wants to run for president. He denies that he's talked to other senators about an impeachment vote. He's denying all this. So if that's the case, then what is he doing?
What if there is no end game?
And there
what
may
if
not
he just
be an
wants
end
to
game.
say what's on his mind?
and
Just a good guy.
Yeah, but politicians, there's always an end game.
I mean, I certainly
Crazy
understand that, and
idea.
we spend our lives analyzing what they, say and do, and what the meaning is behind it or the subtext. But sometimes it's just, this is how I feel.
Yeah.
But Ben, what do you think about that? You combine what he's saying there with the fact he's hosting fundraisers for other Republican candidates around the country. He's directing funds to various candidates. I mean, is this kind of is he kind of emerging as that person that maybe the Republican colleagues need?
Maybe.
Well,
I guess we'll see.
You know, for fundraising, I think they do need. Mitt Romney does help them. I mean, after he lost in 2012, he was still one of the hottest speakers on the circuit for all these other Senate candidates. Yeah. He raised a lot of money for them. Do they owe him a favor now? We'll have to wait and see.
Okay, I guess so. Well, before we leave this, let's talk about the inquiry a little bit. And Michelle, Congressman Ben McAdams, he's been the one that people are watching from the Democratic side, right? Because to see what he's going to do with some of his colleagues there in the House. I want to show a quote from him because he's trying to find the balance that you mentioned just a moment ago, which is why I want your take on this. Congressman McAdams said that I will continue to approach this inquiry with the same thoughtful and deliberative mindset that I have everything else during my time in service. Yeah. Washington is already low on results, and we cannot allow this inquiry to stop our progress altogether.
Yeah. His statement made me forget about what we were talking about. It was just, oh yeah, you're really great. It was more about what he's done before. He took a while to get in. He's now said that he wants to make sure that he remains a neutral judge and see what happens. I think it's safe.
Mm-hmm. Historically, the impeachment proceeding has not been a winning issue.
No.
So
no. It's divisive. American citizens hate political divisiveness. They hate partisanship, even though you hear a lot about it because those that engage in it are loud. But normal voters hate partisanship, and impeachment brings out the ugly.
Yeah, so Ben, I'm not sure anyone hears more on the street than you do from people. Talk about what you're hearing from people about that very issue. Is when we start talking about impeachment, is it turning people off? Is there some risk?
It depends on the topic. I think it's if you are in Ben McAdams' district, he's either not left enough or he's practically a rhino, depending on who you're talking to at the time. It's tough to say. I think people do get fatigued by all of this. You question how much sometimes people are paying attention to everything that is happening in Washington because a lot of politics just gets local. And, it's that thing that's happening over there and whatever. Oh, the president tweeted. Okay, what's a tweet? I think you're in a situation, we're heading into waters where you're not going to win no matter what you do.
He knows it will be weaponized by those who are running against him.
Yeah. But on that point, I think the Democrats, we are going to see articles of impeachment. I think they've gone down that path. I don't think there's any turning back for Nancy Pelosi now and the Democrats. They've started the ball rolling, and I think you're going to see eventually articles of impeachment, and then it goes over to the Senate, and it's just going to be interesting to watch how that all pans out. But I agree with Ben. To a lot of people around the country, they're asking the basic question: what is impeachment, and what did he do that was so bad?
Yeah, there was a time when we didn't hear this word as much as we do now.
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
But but
it's been tossed around against Trump since even before he was elected. I mean, the day after he was elected, all of a sudden, impeachment.
Uh-huh. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit to a local race that's coming up, our Salt Lake City mayor. So, Ben, I'd love to hear what you think about what's happened this last week, because we know these candidates fairly well, but now we're getting the battle of the endorsements. Mm-hmm. Okay, so a big one for Luz Escamilla this week.
Yes. Salt Lake City Mayor Jackie Biskupski. It's been pretty much an open secret in the city that she was supporting Escamilla. She was at the primary election party sporting a Luz for Mayor sticker. So pretty obvious there. But it is a big endorsement, and it does carry some weight because this is the mayor picking who she believes should be her successor. It doesn't also hurt that she was surrounded by some LGBTQ community leaders who were also saying this is who we support as well. Because that's a big voting bloc in Salt Lake City, especially as the city is sort of an island of blue in the red state. Yeah. And but obviously Erin Mendenhall has her own group of endorsements, including 2 of the openly LGBTQ council members who've backed her, as well as, a number of other members of the LGBTQ community. So but it's a significant thing, but it also shows how close this race is going to be. And then, of course, you could make the argument, do endorsements matter or not? Do people pay attention to endorsements? Do voters do? But when you're running such hyper-local campaigns that these people are on, you're going door to door, neighborhood by neighborhood, they have to have some impact in that it's, oh, this person who I respect in the community is saying this. Now, you can also make that argument about whether the mayor is one of those endorsements that you want, because polling-wise, she hasn't exactly been popular at all times. But some of her policy positions, she obviously carries some weight. Some of her environmental initiatives, people who are supportive of her stances on the inland port, they may pay more attention to where she's leaning and who she's supporting.
Yeah. I just want to pick up on what Ben was saying in that regard. When I was in Texas, we used to call Austin the blueberry in the tomato soup. Well, Salt Lake City is the blueberry in Utah's tomato soup, so to speak. So I think, I agree with Ben. I think the Biskupski endorsement probably carries more weight than any of the others, because I'm with Ben. I will always argue I don't think endorsements are a big deal, other than the fact that they may get the media coverage and people may talk about it. But I think in the case of Luz Escamilla, with the mayor behind her, it may help her, but then it may hurt her as well. It's really hard to say.
Go ahead, Michelle.
I don't think it was a surprise. Mendenhall and Biskupski have not had a great positive track record because of inland port.
That's right.
They've butted heads quite a few times, and so I don't think anybody would have expected otherwise. I think it says more about the fact that Mendenhall and Biskupski have always been separate than it does about anything else.
Do you think this endorsement helps Luz Escamilla?
I think any endorsement helps Luz Escamilla as much as endorsements can help, which is not a lot.
So, but there are some interesting, notable people that came out this week for Aaron Mendenhall. Also, Ted Wilson, Karen Shepard. Those were interesting. And I'm kind of curious to what Ben was saying also about these big endorsements. It seems like that's what everyone wants right now.
Yeah, but voters forget. Voters don't say, oh, I really, I really care about what so and so thinks, and so I'm gonna vote because of that instead of what they've learned about the policy positions of the candidates.
And not to make Ted Wilson and Karen Shepard, and not to degrade them in any way, but there are some very young voters who are going, who's Ted Wilson and who's Karen Shepard? So it's really interesting to watch, I think, with endorsements.
So as we get ready to go into this election cycle, which is coming quickly, Rod, if the endorsements have a certain impact, like we just decided, how are these candidates right now trying to differentiate themselves? Because the policies are not very different.
No, they aren't. And I don't know what it comes down to. It's going to turn out, and I think we all know this, on Election Day, who can get out the vote. Who's got the organization, who's going to get people, who's generating enthusiasm among the voters to go actually vote, because turnout in municipal elections, unfortunately, is always very, very low. And it shouldn't be, but that's the case. So I think it comes down to who has the organization to get out the vote.
And I haven't seen any polling yet for the general election, but I suspect that it will be awfully close. Voters that I talk to in Salt Lake City, I'm a Salt Lake City resident as well, and voters I talk to say they're struggling with who to decide, and they, at the end of the day, some of them that I've talked to just throw their hands up and say, I'll be fine with whichever one wins. Really, I think they're both great, but at the end they still have to make that choice. And really, the message is just exercise your right, people. You have a right, exercise it, regardless of who you vote for, what you do. Just vote.
Yeah, that's a nice plug right there.
There you go.
So let's talk about voting, because I've got to talk about Jon Huntsman. Okay, so he's back, Michelle.
Yeah.
All right, back in town, and let's start with one interesting thing. Just this week, he wrote a piece for the New York Times about sanctions in Russia.
Right.
So
really important Utah-based interest that Utah voters are going to cling to when election time comes if he runs for governor.
So why then?
I think, like he said, it was his goodbye letter. It was, this is what I've done for this amount of time. I came in having great hopes of wanting to do a lot, and kind of the bottom fell out of U.S.-Russia policy right when I started, and not quite a justification for why what I wanted to happen didn't happen, but maybe just this is what I wanted, and this maybe is a record going forward of where we should be. I think it was authentic and genuine, and a goodbye.
Okay. We don't often get a governor that has that kind of world experience. So Ben, kind of help us understand what might just happen here, because I think the phrase we heard this week is that he's taking a good look at running for governor again.
You got to do the risk-reward analysis and whether it's worth it. And if he jumps in, the attack ad may have been written from within his own party, which is, you quit us to go work for Obama in China. And then you went to go run for president, and you quit the job you had in China to run for president. And then you went to work for Trump in Russia, and then you quit that to come back to us. You know, are you going to quit us again?
It's a hard narrative.
Yeah.
It's a tough one to overcome, and those are questions that, I mean, I would ask him, and that everybody, every reporter, I think, would ask him is, you know, how serious are you about this, or are we just another stepping stone?
Yeah, why?
Yeah.
And I can see even people within the Republican Party, if he runs as a Republican, I don't know if he runs as an independent or whatever, but writing that and making that a narrative.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Rod.
Well, and there are two things. First of all, the Republican Party here in Utah is a lot different today from what it was when Jon Huntsman first ran. So the party is different. The cell job, I think Ben makes a great point. You know, convince me that you're going to stay with this. Now, you talk to almost everybody. What I find funny, I mean, I can talk from the people who clean our building at the end of the day to some of the best connected people in town. Everyone says, yeah, he's going to run. He's made his decision. He's going to run. Well, nobody really knows that until they announce it, but he's got some challenges. Now, his argument could be, you know, if Utah wants to step up on an international scale, he's got the contacts. I mean, you know, he's been to China, he's been to Russia. You know, some big corporation could get a phone call and hope, by the way, Jon Huntsman Jr. is on the phone. They'll probably answer. So he's got to paint a vision and a picture as to where he wants to take Utah, and Utahns have to believe that he's not going to get up and leave if a better job comes along.
So what does he do, Rod, based on this conversation we just had right there, to reassure voters that he's staying, he's got their interest, maybe this worldview in mind? Tell us what you kind of think he needs to do.
Well, I think, you know, I've been told that of all the jobs that he's had, the job that he felt he was really getting the most done was when he was governor. He really did have an impact. So maybe he plays up on that and says, look what I was able to do when I was governor, and take on those challenges. But I mean, it's going to be a tough sell to convince people. Now, the other thing, you've got two avenues now to get on the ballot. That, you know, he doesn't have to go through the caucus or the convention anymore. He can just get signatures. So there are two different avenues for him to get on.
And so, Michelle, when he left as a very popular governor and has a lot of experience since then. If he enters the race right now, just kind of talk about what happens with these other candidates. The ones we know about, Spencer Cox, we know. Maybe you get Spencer Eccles in this race, Thomas Wright.
I think they just, you know, they remind voters quickly, often, and as much as they can about his record. And but as we've seen Spencer Cox, he says, hey, the more the merrier. You know, this is more conversations, more people come in. It makes it a better conversation. It makes it a better election. He, you know, like he said, he's not afraid of other competition coming in. And he made the distinction of, you know, a Utah royal family versus, you know, I'm just a Utahn. And so, you know, there's lots of things that I think other candidates will be able to play up on.
So Rod, it's interesting to just look at kind of the election itself, because several of these candidates probably are on the same part of the political spectrum. All right. So how does that impact this potential race? As you see it, when you get someone that's more conservative that may jump in this race, like a Greg Hughes or a Thomas Wright, how does...
Well, I think he impacts some of the fringe candidates who've been talking out there. It wouldn't surprise me if he gets in, that Thomas Wright says, no, Spencer Eccles, no. It may come down to a 3 or 4 person race. I think it may come down to Spencer Cox. Greg Hughes is getting in. He's got money. I think Huntsman, if he gets in. And Bishop, I spoke with Bishop in Washington last week, and I said, where are you on this? He said, well, I'm leaning in one direction. And I said, okay, what direction? He wouldn't tell me.
Yes,
so, you know,
right.
but Rob Bishop hates campaigning. He hates raising money. So that may play on him as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
I still think that when you get to the state GOP convention, you're going to have a big field for this wide open seat. And it's going to be a free-for-all. And
We're
you're
like
right.
11 last time.
Yeah, and really, because you also still have Jeff Birmingham, who is actively campaigning right now. And it's just going to be, I think, but remember, Huntsman was very popular some of the highest approval ratings of any governor. So that works in his favor. People like him. People like him a lot.
And they know the name.
They know the name. They trust him. They like him. It's just going to be an interesting, it's going to be a wild race. And yeah, it's different. You don't need to go through caucus convention anymore.
I got to ask you one more thing.
Okay. It would be interesting if he is elected governor, and Mitt Romney, of course, will still be U.S. Senator. Talk about an interesting relationship.
In our last minute or so, I just want to get your take on this. An announcement just today that the state of Utah, at the University of Utah, is going to host the vice presidential debate for 2020. Michelle, what kind of a deal is this?
It's a big deal. It's a huge deal. Utah on the national scene once again. You know, we're more often looked at as relevant in the conversation, and you know, good for Hinckley Institute to get that catch. And I think it's going to be fun and great, and good job. It's awesome.
Kind of excited about it.
It's
also,
huge.
Ben is a member of the press. Okay, go ahead.
We're not just a flyover state anymore, guys.
That was something that's interesting, right? Because the candidates do spend time here. Not only that, they're all going to come here for this. Go ahead.
Well,
Rod.
and I think it's starting to show with this election. It shows the emergence of the Mountain West is starting to get some recognition. The Mountain West states are becoming more and more important as more people move from California to the Mountain West states. These states are becoming more important, and this is an indication, which I think is fantastic for the state, that we're being recognized for that.
Mm-hmm. Is there a Utah way that seems to be resonating nationally?
Yeah, of course, and and it only helps our land development and our land, the property policy and all of that stuff. People come to our parks, and people come here, and we're relevant, and it's nice.
Thank you all for your comments today. We'll be ready for that debate.
Yes.
We need all of you.
We will be.
Well, thank you for watching the Hinckley Report. The show is also available as a podcast on kued.org/Hinckley Report or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for being with us, and join us next week, particularly as we take a closer look at the candidates running to become Salt Lake City's mayor. You're not going to want to miss it. See you next week.